Hello my brothers and sisters of the Order, welcome back to the Order. I'm Celtic Templar, and welcome back to another what-if scenario. And today, y'all, for this type of video, we're actually going to be looking at one of my viewers' type of comments, which this one, I actually have to agree with. This one I think is needing its own type of video, and that is, well, the what-if scenario on what if the said hero's engine actually started the Industrial Revolution. Now, I want to put this out here. Hero of Alexandria created the said hero's engine during the time of the, 1st century BC. Now, I want to also put this out here. He was not the only one to design a working model. Thing is, though, his design was actually the furthest that we got to actually having the first steam engine. So the fact is, what if Hero's engine actually first started the said industrial age? Now I want to put this out here. Also, many times over, his invention only worked like with gadgets and machines, mainly like with toys, or something like a robot, but never fully started the Industrial Revolution. However, what if the Greeks took that a step further? What if in Alexandria started the Industrial Revolution, and in doing so, we get the modern factories? Well, we could see that, but it's a lot different than we understand. In fact, it's also during this timeline, during the 1st century BC, that as well in Rome, there was actually a Roman philosopher who also came up with his own design on the said engine. So he might have copied from Hero, we don't know. But to the major form, anywhere in this type of form in the Mediterranean, we would see the Industrial Revolution start to take place. And pretty much in this form, still in history, well, we still see the modern type of equivalent of the said evolution of the Roman Empire. However, there is one major thing. Because of this type of design of the said steam-powered engine, there is now steam-powered type ships, trains, and later factories. However, I think they would first start it off majorly with something like, say, of the ships. Then, like the Roman trireme, then probably move over to the said factory system, and then probably into the said train system. However, pretty much by the time of the said 9 AD, I would actually see something else, and that would be because of one infamous Greco-Roman. And that would be Marius of Athens, who of which actually creates gunpowder. Now I want to put this out here. Marius of Athens was a scholar in type of ways. He himself actually came up with a design on, well, a form of gunpowder. However, we don't know if it was gunpowder or something else. In fact, he actually just called it an erupted flame. So what that meant is still left to scholars. But if you ask me, it sounds near identical to that of gunpowder. In fact, he actually stated in his notes that he actually had sent to the emperor that apparently he had actually discovered this while working on his family's farm. And now we have to understand what actually is on the farm. We kind of actually have to put it into many forms. Some historians actually state it might have been pigs, might have been cows, we don't know. But one major thing could have actually happened. It's stated that he actually discovered this when he was actually, one of his servants, anyways, accidentally dropped a torch into cow dung, or some sort of dung. And he actually states in the following, an emergence of flame, or an eruption of flame, that immediately emerged from where the said animal matter was actually stationed. So in other words, he might have actually discovered the first version of gunpowder. However, he wasn't exactly the first, because one, Rome and Greece and even Alexandria had discovered more than a couple hundred type of versions of gunpowder, but they never got that close. However, Marius of Athens was later actually stated to even have this information brought to none other than Augustus Caesar. In fact, Augustus Caesar was even stated to have had this Marius of Athens actually brought to Rome in 9 AD. However, upon receiving the information to actually go to Rome, Marius suffered one major problem: the weather. In fact, there was the tide and as well the wind that which was working against him. And by the time he was even able to actually sail to Rome, it had already been late in the year. And in doing so, he had suffered one major cataclysmic problem. He had ended up sailing into a storm. His ship and entire its crew were completely, shipwrecked. In fact, it's actually stated that none other than Marius had actually survived only by the skin of his teeth and only off of a small rock face type of island off the coast of said Athens, at least another 10 miles. Now, it's actually stated that he suffered at least 3 days of heat stroke and was even forced to actually drink his own urine. It's actually stated that he might have gone mad, in which is why Augustus Caesar no longer listened to anything that of which Marius had actually come up with. However, in his alternate timeline, instead of dealing with the said ships, he's actually now having to deal with steam-powered engines. Meaning, no longer need the sails, you just need the steam power to easily push your ship towards Rome. And guess what? This ends up making Rome extremely powerful. In fact, by the end of the 1st century AD, Rome immediately gets a new form of military warfare. They might even have matchlock firearms, and instead of the Romans looking like, well, the Roman legionnaires of the 1st century, they would end up having something like, well, look like that of the said English redcoats during the English Civil War. Rome could then end up conquering majority of Britannia, Germania, further along the Nile, as well even along the said areas of the Iranian plateau, meaning they end up conquering all of the Middle East, pretty much under their favor, unless they get to said Iran. As well, they could probably end up taking over Dacia, and in doing so, pretty much make it a client republic, or a client state, that of which Rome can control. However, Rome would not exactly stand together once and for all. Rome could probably end up suffering from massive civil wars and end up dividing itself along the time. In fact, it's by the 5th century AD I could probably see Rome dividing into another type of nations, such as Gaul, Britannia, Iberia, Germania, Dacia, Carthage, and as well the Roman Empire itself. Rome would end up controlling pretty much, well, its holdings of said East, mainly that of Italy, East North Africa, and as well the Middle East, and anything that of which is, well, south of the Danube River. Dacia, on the other hand, would have to control pretty much anywhere areas, that of which is towards the north of the Danube River, while the said Germanic Republic would probably end up having to end up controlling its said lands between Gaul and as well Dacia. Maybe Rome would end up going into Scandinavia and probably making it into a massive client state just like they did Dacia. However, I don't know what can end up happening to it. However, to this major form, Rome controls the said trade routes towards the east. However, Dacia wants to control that also. So, just like in our own modern timeline, they become like a major empire and push towards the Ural Mountains, and even further, maybe even making a said train system route towards the said lands of China. However, by the 6th century AD, Carthage will create its own form of trade routes pretty much along the said African shoreline, pretty much trying to reach to China. While the fact Iberia, in the process, pretty much comes up with a better idea, to travel towards the west, and in doing so, discovers the Americas. However, also in this timeline, during the 6th century AD, the Islamic uprising ends up happening and emerging in Mecca. Rome ends up putting down the said uprising, and in doing so, it's a massive slaughter fest. Islam is not exactly a major religion anymore. It is just, well, would be viewed just like that of Judaism. So in doing so, Rome ends up having to keep its major holdings, and in doing so, holds a major strategic importance along the area. As well, the majority of Europe is Christian. However, this would soon spread to the rest of the entire parts of Africa and other parts of the said Asia and such, and later into the Americas, which by the late 6th century, colonization ends up happening, and in doing so, I could actually see the Americas in its own various form and way, meaning that one major form, Iberia takes the place of the Spanish, Carthage takes the place of the Portuguese, as well as pretty much Britannia and Gaul take the place of Britain and France. So in other words, the Americas still end up the same way as they do in our own timeline. There would be an alternate revolution of some sorts, and in doing so, it might lead to the downfall of the said Gallic monarchy. Does this mean that Gaul would end up having its own Napoleon? No. There would be no Napoleonic Wars because one major problem. Germania is fully united, and in doing so, so is Iberia, Carthage, and as well Britannia. And as well, there's probably a peace treaty that keeps Gaul from actually committing to massive genocidal type warfare. So in other words, no Napoleon of any type of Gaul, and no sacking and march on Moscow. It's just a sheer brutality and sheer civil war in Gaul, until it is finally reestablished. However, this alternate timeline also gives us to a major form. There would probably not be any form of slavery, or if there were, it would probably have died down by the time of the 9th century AD. Meaning, by the 800s, there might be a civil war, but as well might not be a civil war in the Americas. But it's by the late 9th century that we end up getting the colonization of Africa, only 1,000 years earlier. Meaning, one major form. Rome would end up taking the eastern part of Africa, Carthage, the northwestern part of Africa. Gaul would probably end up controlling areas and land, probably below Carthage. Britannia, probably around South Africa and as well Madagascar. And Germania, pretty much in areas around the Congo. However, this also brings to our later form in time. By the late 9th century, Russia probably breaks away from Dacia. Knowing to the fact that, one, the Rus actually despise the Dacian occupation and end up declaring independence, and as well establish their own monarchy as well. One in which is probably ends up making it better for the said Russian people. Dacia wants revenge, and probably ends up engaging in many civil wars or conflicts with the said Russian people. However, it ends badly. And as well, by the early 10th century, there might even be the death of a crown prince of Dacia. This would probably lead to World War I. The central powers would be of Germania, Dacia, and the Roman Empire. The allies would be of Gaul, Carthage, Britannia, Russia, and later the modern or alternate United States. The conflict probably still goes the same way as it does in our timeline. In fact, I could actually see the Roman Empire taking place of the said, Ottoman Empire, while in fact Dacia is the take place of the said Austro-Hungarians. This, though, ends up becoming a major front on all ends. While the fact that Germania doesn't have to deal with one of trying to force its way through the said lands of Russia, like it does in our own timeline during World War I, it does have to deal with Gaul. And also does Gaul have to deal with the country of said Germania and as well Italy. However, there is also major conflicts in the Mediterranean with naval ship battles between Carthage and Rome. However, I could actually see World War I ending the same way as it does in our own timeline. Dacia loses their lands, and as well so does Germania and Rome. This ends up forming the modern-day lands and countries of Poland, Ukraine, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, Denmark, Belgium, Holland, Serbia, Yugoslavia, and as well even Macedonia, the Italian Republic, and even the Byzantine Republic, which would be the mix of Greece and Turkey. However, in this alternate timeline, I could end up seeing Macedonia end up controlling majority of its areas of the lands of Yugoslavia, as well as Serbia. In other words, with the fall of the Roman Empire, we end up seeing into a massive type of form of conflict. And in doing so, I could probably see Macedonia end up controlling majority of lands north of Greece. However, this doesn't mean that it's all fun and game for the Allies. Russia falls into civil war, and in doing so, the monarchy is banished. In other words, it is another type of version of history that we can understand. This is not communist revolutions, but it's actually what we might call a form of liberation and democracy. In other words, an end of conflict entirely, and in doing so, there is no Bolshevik revolution. It's just a civil war for democracy, and the democracy wins the entire war. However, with the great downfall of the said Central Powers, Carthage, Britannia, and Gaul end up claiming more land and such. Carthage would probably end up claiming lands such as Libya and Egypt, while in Africa, Britannia ends up controlling the German colonies, And as well in the Middle East, Britannia ends up taking control of Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, and Canaan. Gaul ends up controlling the lands of Dedan, Chad, Somalia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman, meaning that in former forms of the Roman Empire, it is divided and even conquered. This, though, ends up leading to an alternate World War II in the 930s, pretty much probably started by Rome. Rome wants to retake the Eastern Mediterranean, probably established by a new type of form of dictator, or in this case, new Roman emperor, who immediately emerges from the said Roman Republic. Probably from the said council system, I don't know. I could actually see an alternate Benito Mussolini take charge. This actually means that one major thing. Rome would end up having to conquer lands such as Macedonia and later on the Byzantine Republic. However, even in our own timeline, this did not end well for Italy. Italy didn't have the manpower or resources or great leadership to do this, and unfortunately it led to its own military downfalls down the line. However, its own engagements in conflict actually were helped out by the said Germans. In fact, even General Rommel stated that the Italian military were actually highly motivated to fight. The only problem was it lacked proper leadership. So, yeah. However, Germania grows in strength and size, and even tries to conquer the eastern territories. And as well, it even ended up having the form of the country of China, ended up pushing out any form of imperialist powers. This means the one major thing. China, Germania, and Rome end up forming the Axis powers, while the Allies end up forming of Gaul, Britannia, Russia, United States, Japan, Eastern Europe, the Byzantine Republic, and Carthage. From 940 to 942, no battles are actually seen in North Africa, because one major thing. Rome doesn't have any colonies in North Africa anymore. In fact, in our alternate timeline, they did. But, because of the fact that they don't in this timeline, they can't actually do this. So, guess where they have to go? They have to go as far as Constantinople, which I could probably only see them as conquering lands as far east as Constantinople, before they are pretty much forced to stop. Germania is end up facing off against the said Russians and as well any form of the Eastern militaries. However, even in our own timeline, it ends up somehow stopping somewhere near Moscow and the Volga River. By late 942, Rome is pushed back to Italy, and in doing so, Rome ends up being forced to surrender. 943, China loses ground to the United States, Britannia, and Japan. As well, Gaul is liberated in 943. Germania is pushed back to Warsaw by the Russians. By 944, Germania is forced to surrender because it's being encircled. And in late 944, China is pushed further into the Tibetan mountains until they finally surrender entirely to the Allies. By 945, China is separated into various countries. And in doing so, pretty much helps out to the modern China to this day. From the 950s to the 970s, we end up having to see the decolonization of Africa, Middle East, and as well Asia. There might actually be a different type of form of history. For one major reason I can actually explain why, is to the fact that one, religion isn't dividing India. India is not divided between Hindu or as well Islam. It is just one pure version of Hinduism. So in other words, it controls more land than it does in our own timeline. China is separated into various countries, as I said. And as well, maybe religion ends up uniting all these type of nations into one. Honestly, I could end up seeing the Khmer Republic, or as well, even they said, a fully unified Korea, and as well, a liberated Manchuria and such. There is probably going to be a different variation of what it's going to look like, but I don't know what it's going to look like. Because one, even in our own timeline, this is a lot different. However, by the 11th century, we end up having the same type of technology we end up having in the 21st century. Now, many people would end up asking, Templar, what is the major difference of this? Well, other than the fact we're 1,000 years ahead of our own time, there's actually no major spread of Islam. Islam is just a version of, well, Judaism. In other words, Hebrews. As well, there is no Islamic caliphates, which means no crusades. No communism is ever established because one, Karl Marx isn't even alive yet. This means that there is no Soviet Union, there is no Eastern Bloc, there is no Yugoslavia that is communist, there is no communist China, no communist North Korea, no Vietnam which is communism. There is no communism whatsoever. As well, there is no Adolf Hitler in this timeline. As one, this ends up being to the form that there is no extermination of the Jewish population. So the fact is, with this form and timeline, I could end up seeing an alternate version. This means that one major form in history actually is coming around. Rome is actually established itself as a form of a republic, as which, even though Constantinople is so much sieged, it's not exactly destroyed. Christianity is the major religion, comparing that to other religions. Now, in fact, don't get me wrong, there would be Islam, but it wouldn't be as strong as it would be in our timeline. And the fact is, in this alternate form, we can actually see a different type of world. I can actually see the Americas still emerging the same way they are. However, there is one major thing also in this form. The major language isn't English. It is actually probably Celtic. In fact, Celtic speech is, well, the majority language of the said Britannia and Gaul. So in fact, the Celtic language would end up actually emerging everywhere compared to what it is in our modern timeline. Now here's the thing, if you want to know how hard it is to speak Celtic, it's extremely hard. But what does this mean to our alternate form? Well, by our modern standards, this means that we would be 1,000 years ahead in time. And this means I don't know what the next few 100,000 years would end up looking like. I don't know what 1,000 years of technology would end up looking like in our near future. Seeing the fact I don't have a time machine and I can take a look in time and see what's going to happen. So, sadly, yeah. But now I hear many people already saying, but Templar, doesn't this mean that, one, we might be over 1,000 years in time and we could end up being somewhere in space? Probably yes, which also kind of scares me because, one, by the 1940s I could probably see a wonder weapon made by Adolf Hitler being the Death Star. Oh boy. Oh, that's going to be scary as hell now I think about it. But if any of y'all have any ideas of how this could have ended, let me know in the comments below. As well, y'all, if any of y'all have any what-if scenarios y'all want me to cover, please let me know in the comments below as well. I'll be happy to actually do a video on them. Anyways, guys, I've been Celtic Templar. Hope to see y'all in the next one. Like, subscribe for more, and have a great day.